Welcome audiences for another series of Asia Federalism Dialogue. As you have been witnessing our performance for last 5 or 6 series, we are discussing today, we are discussing about different aspects of federalism in Asian and even broader context. Today we have an expert from India, Mr. Varun Sharma, who is an expert in the field of participatory local governance. He has been working as an expert in this field for last 20 years plus. After his engineering graduation in 2000, he has been extensively working in the field of, let's say, law, management, and other things. He has got an MBA in human resources in 2013. He is, so to speak, a community worker because he has established so many organizations, and he is the founder member over there. That includes, but not limited to, Alliance for Immunization and Health, and India Child Labor Free Zone Communities, and then he's also one of the team members of Stop Child Labor in India. So, this is how he has been working in the communities for last 20 years or so. So today we are going to discuss or talk something about how federal countries have been coping with their financial stress. So this is a very, very broad topic and very important topic to the scholar of federalism. So welcome to you, Mr. Sharma. It's of course a pleasure seeing you online because of the pandemic, but it's a pleasure seeing you people from around the world. May I just begin with a very, very generic question about let's say the fiscal stress that many federal countries around the world, and you may take some references from the South Asian region. So what would be your take in terms of defining the fiscal stress that federal, provincial, and local governments in federal countries have been facing?
Thank you. I just begin my conversation with a few things because within South Asia, always, it looks like all the South Asian countries are basically federal, but the structure is very different. Only India, Nepal, and Pakistan is basically a federal republic. But if you look at the Bhutan is basically monarchy where kingdom is going on. Bangladesh is also a unilateral republic where Sri Lanka is a basically semi-presidential. So within South Asia, India, Nepal, and Pakistan is basically the federal country. And if we look at the examples from India, all three countries having the center, provincial government, and the local self-government. But the larger question you ask, and this question is also very relevant in the current pandemic, where state is fighting for revenue, how they get revenue from the center. So stress is very high, and within I'm also part of the state body. So every second month we are sending a letter to the central government, why you are not releasing our money? Because due to pandemic, their collection of revenue is very low. So they are trying to delay and, giving the excuses. So this is an area actually. If we look at, how this entire physical structure is going on within a country. So there are basically a process through which state central is getting money. So most important part is state said they generate the revenue because people are living in a state. Center is basically very identical place. So they said revenue is generated in our area, but we are not being able to utilize. So if we look at 1 rupees in India, 18 paisa central government giving for giving the interest of the loan we have taken from different banks across the world. So see, the stress begin from there. So when I get 1 rupee, it's only 80 paisa in my kitty. 20 paisa automatically deducted to give the. Then I'm talking about there are a different kind of subsidies. There are the lots of military expenditure in these countries, except Nepal, Pakistan, and India. Both are basically in different conflicts. So defense is one of the priority. Then around 25 percent money basically state is receiving through different taxes. So in such pandemic time, when the revenue collection goes down, stress is begin increase between state and center. And worst part with the system is our federal governments are not prepared for any such kind of pandemic. Although whenever these kind of situation happen, state always get a bank guarantee from the central government. So from bank guarantee, they are overdraft their money from bank, and then later on bank is released. But if bank is not ready to give you over guarantee, stress and state and central relationship under conflict. So if we look at in from India point of view, every 1 rupee we have already lost 60 paisa in these processes. So only 40 paisa is means 40% of the money is basically available for either work on the development issues across the country. So that's how there is a very different commitment, because we have a political system. A political party come with a manifesto. Their manifesto involved so many interventions. Their intervention cost need money, but they don't have money. There is a different electoral mandate for the central government. There is a different electoral mandate for the state government. So there are lots of intervention also conflicted with each other. So these, things are creating lots of stress, and largely bureaucrats are basically fighting at central level for receiving more money from the central government. And at central level, they are, rationalizing the money so everybody could be happy. So this is the larger role of bureaucracy in federalism. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Sharma. That is quite insightful in terms of how, let's say, practically speaking, how money can be the subject matter of conflict within the operationalization of federal settings. Here in Nepal, what we have seen during the constitution drafting process in 2014-15 is that the issue of power sharing, particularly the financial power sharing across jurisdiction, including that federal government, provincial government, and local government, was really heightening. Many of the critics would appear suddenly and say, well, no, you cannot say that the federal government always have the upper hand, whereas the provincial and local governments have lower hands to ask for help and support as if they don't have anything. But as you indicated, that the federal government is just an identical place because most of the people stay in at the local level. Because you are an expert in local governance as well, Mr. Sharma, my question now would be about taxation, because you also pointed out some dimension of taxation in the previous response to the question. But what is happening in many of the federal countries in Asia is that local governments or provincial governments are getting less, whereas the federal government or central government is having more in terms of the quantity or the percentage or proportion of the taxation amount and so forth. And there's a rationale behind that the federal government has the responsibility to implement the distributory policies by, let's say, giving some amount of money to those who are in need and so forth. But when it comes to the democracy perspective, federal governments or provincial governments have the similar responsibility to fulfill or to deliver to the citizens. So what would be your observation in terms of defining this taxation sharing role across jurisdictions? In particular, for example, what should local governments do? What should provincial governments do to increase their own domestic income so that they don't rely entirely upon the federal government or central government?
It is also important to understand, because you are also talking about the local governance, and a country in India which is pioneer in initiating that process in 1966. So it is also important. I'm just sharing a data. If we look at the revenue, because in federal government, total budget is basically depend on the revenue. So in India, state-owned revenue is around 52.5%, and central transfer is around 47.5%. So again, state is keep asking, although we are generating the money, but we are only having 47.5% out of this. So why it happened? Because nowadays, the political structure also, lots affect the federalism a lot. What happened? Earlier, we have the state-sponsored schemes, okay, where center is putting a grant which is not, defined into some sort of a boundary, and this is unplanned grant, we can say. And state is, use that grant for develop their own schemes, design their intervention and all. But later on, in last 20 years, what happened? Large number of schemes are designed at the federal central level. So state is only an implementer. Okay. And if you are only an implementer, the name of scheme also depend on who's putting the money. So if a scheme is for the state system, in state we have the chief minister, and in central we have a prime minister. So large number of schemes are by the name of prime minister. So within a political arena, if the government is the same party, this is okay. But if there is a opposition party in center and opposition in state, there is a big conflict about the name of scheme itself. So what happened? Number one, state, and number two, in India, central is also giving direct money to the gram panchayats. So gram panchayat is the basically local body. So every a cluster of 3 say 4 villages comes into a gram panchayat. It's a 3-tier structure where a block, which is a larger structure, where around 40 plus gram panchayats over there, and there is a district. So we have 2 different structures in India. For urban local bodies is the different, and rural local bodies is the different. Central government also provide direct grant to these local bodies. So state is again asking, and it's a huge, last year it's around 2 lakh crore Indian rupees for the rural local bodies. So central also keep eye on, these things. So nowadays what happened, why, the question you have asked, there is disparity even different states. Within India, few states are very progressive states, and few states comes under backward states. Like Rajasthan, where I live, 80% of the state comes under desert, so less water, less agriculture. But when central is, giving money, they are also prioritizing these states first. But these states also performance-wise also low. So later on, by the end of the year, when we complete our adjustment of budget, we receive less. For example, last year, if you look at Assam, Chhattisgarh, Odisha, Madhya Pradesh are top loser states within the country. Just because our these states already performing poor, so they have huge revenue loss because they are not completing things on time. If we look at percentage in tax revenue, state is having around 44% of the money from tax revenue. So in 44% of tax revenue, 20% come from GST, and GST is calculated by central government. So non-timely payment of these tax. So state is fighting only another 27% tax is collected by the state. So which is available with the state. So state, if we run a state, you need to contribute for the central scheme first, because large number of central schemes are now 60-40 ratio. Like if a scheme is initiated by central government, so they are putting 60% money, like Jal Jeevan Mission, which is the Har Ghar Nal Yojana. Every household must have a tap so they can get water. So now state need to put their 40% share to get this 60% share. So state money already lying with the central government, and now center is asking you need to put your share. So these are the basically issues. But in India, what is very important thing we need to understand, in last 20 years, the local self-governance structure is become very strong in terms of finance, because every gram panchayat is about to receive 40 lakh Indian rupees every year. So if they can plan, they can, easily, develop their gram panchayats more impactfully, and more work local politician can do at their level. So public participation in development process, just you must heard about it, maximum governance, minimum government.
Right. Yes, of course.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
thank you.
yeah.
Sorry for the interruption, Mr. Sharma. That gives me a clue about different modalities of how the federal government or central government in some federal countries have been arranging their fiscal transfer mechanisms. For example, here in Nepal, we have got 4 different types of transfer mechanism. The first one is fiscal equalization grants, which means that the federal government can transfer a certain amount of money in terms of the equalization grant. That means they also have to have the similar amount of money to perform certain projects or programs. Then comes conditional grants. This is the second category of the grant, which means that the central government or the federal government provides certain amount of money to provinces or local governments with an attachment of certain conditions, that they have to fulfill certain conditions, like you must have 40% of participation from marginalized communities and so forth. And then comes the matching grants, which means that the provincial or local governments must have to have, or at least they need to be able to show that the similar amount of money is there to perform certain projects and programs. Then comes the special grants, which is rarely happening here in Nepal. But what it means is that when certain local governments or provincial governments require certain amount of money for certain purpose, in that case, the law has provided the power to the federal government to offer special grants to provincial and federal governments. But here my interest now, Mr. Sharma, is on, you rightly pointed out, we have got very, very good practice and examples from in the Indian state of Kerala, where participation of ordinary people in the making of development planning or annual budgets for their own municipal territories is remarkably well understood, both within academia and practice. So do you have any comments on it in terms of how ordinary people can actually influence the way local governments are getting funds from the upper tier of the governance, if you like, or the internal revenue resources that are raised domestically by either rural or urban municipalities? So do you have any take on that?
Yeah, actually, what happened in Kerala, the state, especially the local bodies, developed in a way. So now they are generating large number of revenues, not only for, like their own building, they are, using as a hotel guest house. So they start thinking, how we can generate revenue at our own. So until unless, if you look at everything from a business angle, if you start generating something, you become more responsible. So later on, even in Kerala, they are promoting, exotic variety of, black pepper and other colors and everything, and they start into the business also. Apart from that, at local level, their own self-help group mechanism, which is the women's self-help group mechanism, and Kudumshri is the name of that institution. That institution come in power, and these women take up the responsibility of panchayat level planning process. So not in the rural urban area, but in rural area also, women participation in planning is very much increased in Kerala. And that's how, government of India initiated Rashtriya Gram Swaraj Abhiyan in India, where idea is, the participation of self-help groups, is particularly the women from remote area, needs to be increased in the planning process. And you must heard about the bottom-up planning process. So if the people from rural area, or those are, sitting at the last mile, if they start, thinking there is some resources are available, we need to share what intervention we are looking for. So even the idea of current government is they need to increase money at the Gram Panchayat level, and decrease money in the central sponsored fixed schemes. So idea is village or a gram panchayat needs to be plan their own intervention rather than intervention are designed at central level. Intervention needs to be designed at the bottom of the pyramid level. Yeah.
Many thanks for this wonderful remarks on different modalities of fiscal transfer and then their common problems associated with them. Um, yeah, I have gone through some of the publications made by the Indian state of Kerala, both by their practical or practitioners and by external academics. So I can remember some of the names there, but it's not necessary at the moment. So finally, Mr. Sharma, we have very limited time, but I'm a little bit interested to know more about your own observation about some of the comparative phenomenon of the term that we are talking today. So for example, in Nepal, the issue of financial power transfer among or between different levels of government was really hot at that time when the constitution was being drafted between 2010 and 15. In Sri Lanka, for example, the issue is still contested. The natural resources distribution policies there are always contested, although it's not exclusively a federal country like, as you said, in the beginning of the conversation of India and Pakistan. Pakistan also has some or similar problems associated with this fiscal transfer, but it seems like after 2010 or 9, they have reframed some of the dimensions of this fiscal transfer. Hence, we have some evidence from Pakistan that there are areas which can be solved through legislative processes and so forth. India, as you said, that the central government has a bigger role in determining the policies of transfer. Of course, the central government is richer than the state and provincial governments, and that happens everywhere in the world, including in the US. But what I'm trying to stress here is that the federal government or the central government has more power in even defining policies for distribution. So what would be your final comments on these comparative ideas about the role of different actors within this fiscal transfer regime?
Basically, here we have another element which is called the National Finance Commission and State Finance Commission. So there is a two separate institution also. The role of these commissions is basically to promote, more development with governance. So these commissions grant also directly reaching to all the states, and they have divided a formula basically. So now, last many years, people are complaining central is basically doing some partiality between the states and where they ruled and they're not ruled. So many in 15 years back, they have come with a formula basically through which they are, providing money to the state. But still, what important part in entire process, until unless we can't, bring awareness among common people, and they are not, being participate in the process, especially in urban areas. Still, in rural areas, the participation level is increased, but in urban areas, the people's participation in planning process is really very poor. So, result of that, lots of interventions come. People surprised, is it not necessary? So until unless we cannot work on people's participation, this stress we cannot be removed, because the central versus stress could be removed by increasing people's participation, because same people are giving mandate to the state government as well as the central government. So if entire, and this state and central is always going on, it's a dream of every bureaucrat ki go to the central because it's a more power. As you are a bureaucrat, more powerful than, and money is the power actually in the entire process. Although we are talking about governance a lot, but many times, and even especially in case of South Asia, is still we are literate, but people are not that much aware about the power of common citizen. So this is something I feel, if people also understand, the relationship, power of participation, power of planning, then, lots of stress could be automatically removed from the system. This is something I just want to say.
All right, thank you very much. Given that we have exceeded the time limit, I would be very, very happy to say you very, very much appreciation for your contribution in today's discussion. Dear audience, we have touched upon some of the basic ideas of what fiscal stress to the federal government is, to what extent it is remarkable in defining the intergovernmental relations both vertically and horizontally. What is the role of provincial and state level governments or local governments in determining the policies for grants and so forth. So thank you very much, Mr. Sharma. Do you have any final remarks to say?
Yeah. Thanks.
Please.
Thanks. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.